Hello and welcome to another episode of the Transportation Exchange podcast presented by Rush Truck Centers of Canada. I'm your host, Jason Cuddy, and on today's episode, we welcome back Terry Ma. Terry, welcome back to the podcast. We're back to talk a little bit about what we talked about last time, but more specifically the electrification, product line that Rush supports, and also kind of what the infrastructure looks like and what's happening to support it going forward. So not so much a deep dive into one like we did last time, but I know you were recently at one of the most recent electric trade shows here in Toronto that was kind of industry specific or had a lot of industry representation on the heavy side, so not always just passenger that we see. Maybe give us a little bit of feedback of what you saw there and some takeaways from that event.
Yeah, it was the first EV and charging show in Toronto. So it was basically a nationwide event. There was good representation for the first show, I think. They had ride experiences there for anything from electric bicycles right up to Class 8 trucks. So it was a real range of products there to look at and suppliers for chargers and vehicles and software systems, maintenance systems, all kinds of different things like that. A lot of good speakers there with government speakers and right down to manufacturers and components. So, just about everything you could think of was there. For a first show, it was impressive that they had that much on tap. And the crowd seemed to like doing the drives, so checking out the vehicles and seeing the differences. And a lot of it is still based, on the final mile deliveries. So, like I said, with the bicycles and some of the small vehicles for delivering inner city. But it is definitely growing in the medium and heavy truck division, which is what we obviously specialize in.
Yes.
And we've still got a long way to go in that department. And it's going to be selective for a little while as to what makes sense as battery technology and software progresses.
Yeah, and I think that's, from where we were kind of talking after you went to, and you can see the notes and everyone's on LinkedIn, everyone's posting kind of what's happening. And I think that the feedback you're getting, I agree, everyone likes to drive the vehicles. The technology is really cool. And I think driving it really gives you a different appreciation of what it does. But the underlying kind of theme to it, and we've had other people on the show talk about it, is really it's the infrastructure that really needs to kind of be leading the charge now versus the vehicles. The vehicles seem to be not an issue to get to market, but infrastructure is sort of where we need government support. And obviously there's some feedback there as far as where we are with it. Kind of what was the general consensus as far as how the infrastructure is keeping up with the truck technology.
Yeah, for the smaller delivery stuff, the infrastructure is pretty much there. There's lots of chargers around now, and there's more online all the time. But for the medium to heavy trucks, there's really no public infrastructure for that at this point. And that was one of the reasons I was there, is just to investigate more with the suppliers as to where that was, because we're learning as we go along. We're finding out that chargers that we thought were going to work won't work. And a lot of it is just the software primarily and the amount of voltage. There's chargers out there that now have been out for 6 and 8 years that they're just completely antiquated. So, and that's some of the infrastructure that already needs to be switched out. And we had a bit of a conversation before we started here on just when you were doing computers when you were younger and how,
right.
We went from how many kilobytes or megabytes and then terabytes, and you're upgrading constantly for a long time there. And now all of a sudden nobody really talks about that because there's tons of storage in your phone, let alone your computer.
Yeah.
So we're still at the first stage on trucks, primarily. The smaller vehicles, again, they don't need as much of that. But the trucks, it's going to be a little while. And it looks like what I'm hearing is most of the medium to heavy trucks are going to be they're going to be setting up the charging systems at like card locks.
Gotcha.
Mainly because of space for parking a 53-foot trailer and tractor, or even a straight truck when you're, you got a 24-foot body with 10 feet ahead of that.
Yeah.
You need a parking spot that's 35 feet plus turning space, and it's a bit wider too. So those aren't going to fit into the parking lot mall chargers, really. They really haven't planned for that at all yet.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to key point. When we had the team from Navistar on walking through, and I think that the first thing, they have the 5 C's they talk about, but the first thing really is consulting, right? And I think this really drives home that point that I guess for 2 reasons. A is, what is the available infrastructure for the vehicle you're trying to use? Like you said, the smaller it is, probably a better chance of public infrastructure. But if not, what's required on your facility to get going? And what is out there on the road for route analysis planning. You got to plan all this stuff out. If you need to charge on the way, you got to figure out where it is, what is available, if anything, or how soon is it coming. But I think the other piece you mentioned is, the array of charging providers that's on the market within North America is vast, and everyone brings something to the table, and then it's a matter of finding what actually works for you. Because I think, as we've experienced with our unit is, the demo unit we have is, there's voltages you need to hit, certain, minimum voltage requirements coming in, to the charger to be able to actually make it work functionally, as well as there's that, the handshake, right, kind of thing, as far as from a digital point of view, that it's not, you can put the charger into the truck, that's fine, but it has to also then talk to each other. And there's some interaction there that needs to get updated. And I think as every vehicle comes online, that gets updated. So there's a lot to wrap your head around, I think, up front.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things I was even surprised talking to some of the charger suppliers and the challenges they're still having when a new car comes out. Even they have to upgrade their handshake or the protocols for the charger, and then they have to download it to all their chargers so that it'll charge that new vehicle, even if it's a car.
Right.
Some of them don't meet the same protocols as other cars, even of their own line of products. So and it's changing again. Like I said, it's the first generation, second generation, maybe third generation, but they're going to keep coming out, and they're going to get smarter. Everybody wants to charge faster.
Yes.
So like our EMV, for instance, will charge at 125 kilowatt hours in an hour, but I mean they're testing in Europe for 1,000 at a time. So yeah. It's going to come, and people want to charge these things in 15 minutes, and it's not. They're not capable right now, but no. I could see in a couple of years, they will be able to charge in 20 minutes for a truck like that.
Yeah, and it'll be technology-based, right? Obviously, there's a charger to do it, but also the battery has to be able to take it, right? You don't want to degrade these things horribly quick either by, it's a lot of heat going into battery. Mm-hmm. So the technology from the battery side has to be able to accommodate this high-level fast charging as well. And as we're finding out from all the different OEMs, there's tons of different, battery chemistries still being used. No, there's no one underlying one that seems to be dominant. Mm-hmm. They all seem to work, but you all get the same thing. It's like, don't run it down to 0. Don't fully top it up to 100, kind of live in that sweet spot, which plays with the range a bit too, but it's learning that. So it'll be interesting what comes out as we go forward.
Yeah, even the charger cables for the faster charging vehicles now have to be cooled. Like they have cooling systems right in the charging cable. So it's there's a lot of things coming and that's all going to change. I'm sure if it's liquid now, it's probably going to be something different going down the line.
Yeah, no fair. And that's kind of nice thing about the expo, right? I mean, you get some positive takeaways. Yes, there's some infrastructure challenges, and I think it's a disruption to how we've done business over the last 100 years as far as moving goods with, combustion engines. So there is going to be some growing pains, but I think, like you said, the expo was well attended, from all levels, all different OEMs. So clearly there's there's a push for all these companies to get the infrastructure to catch up, and I think it will. It's just a matter of, like you said, finding out, what do you invest in as far as from the government side, what did they help get out to the public facilities so that they can drive the interest and drive the growth of this? Because obviously there's a push, going to be from the federal level to get these, zero emission vehicles out on the road sooner than later.
Yeah. Oh, and just to meet the emissions standards coming in the U.S. through California and the other states that are getting online with it. And it's going to push the manufacturers to come up with those vehicles, and it's going to push everybody to follow line eventually.
Yep.
As it has with every other vehicle for the last 40 years.
Exactly. Well, and speaking of vehicles, I mean, that's part of the other reason we wanted to kind of touch base on today is, as a dealership here, we now have 3 product lines that either have or are about to have zero emission battery electric vehicles. We talked the Navistar. We'll finish up on that one. We can kind of go into some new information we have since we last talked about it. But I guess new to the market for us in general is Battle Motors, which is, I think it's new to Canada here through us. It's a low entry cab forward unit. Traditionally, the refuse side is kind of where you see it. If you're trying to picture it, it's kind of like your garbage truck kind of cab, but they're electric. They've got an electric option, which is pretty neat. So that'll be interesting to see. As you said, you talk about final mile. This is a totally different application. It's almost like a school bus application where this kind of makes sense, right? It's a lot of stop and go, and usually a short run. So this could be an interesting fit within the zero emission market.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense on that kind of product where you're using your brakes a lot to regen, not going long distances, not going high speeds to ramp up and use a lot of power. So you're just doing short runs and idling quite a bit, which doesn't use much power either. With electric, anyway, if you're idling a diesel, you're still using diesel.
Yep.
But yeah, those kind of products and that kind of route is ideal. Like school buses are out there.
Right.
A lot of that makes sense. A lot of inner city use for these kind of trucks.
Yeah, and I think you see it in the range. Like they don't have huge range. You see these big trucks, you think they should have massive ranges, but I mean they're about just over 200 kilometers of range, which doesn't sound like much, but to your point, they're not going far, right? They're doing loops every day, a lot of stop and start. Like you said, where the regen is going to help. They can charge in about 3 to 6 hours, depending again on the kilowatts coming in. But but they got the weight, right? They're 26,000, 54,000 GVW. So it's a lot of weight for an electric truck. That's kind of, we haven't seen much above 33,000 yet in a lot of where we play. So this is one of the larger ones we've seen come to market anyways, outside of a Class 8, say, tractor. But yeah, it's an interesting number that the range, when you look at it, you go, it's not very far, but it doesn't have to go far.
No, and I was talking to a customer this morning already I met with that he hauls a fair bit of weight, and that was the only concern because the trucks do weigh a little bit more. But, the guy delivers, usually his trucks only do 100K a day, but they're in the city and they haul a fair bit of weight. So, I mean, the power is there for these trucks because they got lots of torque, and the inner city stuff, it's no problem to go 100K a day with these trucks if you're braking a lot too.
True.
So they're regenning really well. So it would make a lot of sense for them in inner city delivery with some heavy weight and a lot of stop starts.
Agreed. And especially if it's a garbage truck or a school bus, I'm sure like even the neighborhoods appreciate, not having those big exhausts, fumes of smoke as you take off, or just even the noise of the engine running, right? A lot of garbage, like on ours, they get picked up fairly early in the morning. So, now you just hear the brakes, you won't hear the revving engine every, 20 feet between houses kind of thing.
Yeah. And they're quiet all out. They're quiet for the driver and for the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of noise stipulations around hospitals and nursing homes and places like that they don't want to have engines or backup alarms going off all the time. If these vehicles turn tighter, they don't have to back up as much.
True. Good point.
So those things all work well in those kind of neighborhoods.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that type of truck, it's not to market yet. But, from the press releases and general information we received is Isuzu is coming out with their electrified NRR, which I think is a sweet spot for this type of product line. Like you mentioned, it's, it's that final mile, local delivery, their range, depending on the different battery packs. And this will change as they kind of refine it and come to market. But, they're looking anywhere from 60 to 300 kilometers roughly, So that seems like a ideal kind of range for, something that's inner city, but maybe, goes just outside the city a bit and has to come back. And a nice part is it's their traditional NRR series vehicle, which everyone knows, which already sells really well in an inner city type vehicle. And, have the same sort of wheelbases that everyone's used to handle probably 90% of what guys are looking for.
Yeah. And a lot of people doing service work seem to be interested in those trucks. The service industry, like service trucks for the trucking industry or reefer repair work or any of those service bodies for even electrical work, things like that. Those trucks don't usually go long distances. Again, they're in the city a lot. They need that payload.
Yeah.
and that they make a lot of sense for what they are because, again, they're cab over or low front entry vehicles that, they turn on a dime, and they're great in the city.
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of those, if it's service vehicle, a lot of times it's running all the time, parked on the side of a road or in a yard, to run a compressor or something else, right? So, I mean, you're going to have EPTOs on a lot of these. If they're not here today, they'll definitely be coming. So there's a lot of functionality that, again, in a yard somewhere, if you got to work, it's a lot quieter, which is nice, but also you don't have that wear and tear anymore of running the engine all day long just to either keep the cab cool for the guy when he gets back in or to run accessory equipment, in the field to do what they need to do.
Yeah, I was happy to hear that they're coming out with the PTO right on the Isuzu right off the bat.
Yeah,
so
I think
a
that's
lot
huge.
of other manufacturers aren't there yet with that.
No, or it's coming soon. But I think they recognize, given what that product does, it's always something tied to it in one way or another. So it's very versatile. It's like I said, landscape or little reefer body, or it's a service body. It's got to run something off of it.
Mm-hmm.
You need that functionality, right? So if you want it to be adopted right away, you need to kind of work like your current truck.
Yeah. I think most of the takeaways I got really were, if you're going to look at this kind of thing right now, you want to have the ability to go back to your base every day to charge at night.
Right.
And that seems to be, that keeps you away from having to hit a public charging system, which a lot of them just aren't there yet. And you don't have to worry about chargers being down because there's a big, there is a big issue with chargers that are just, like I said, antiquated or
right.
or not in service. It happens all the time. I've been by lots of them when they're shut down, and you're thinking, well, what's the issue?
Yeah.
And they don't get serviced right away.
Right.
They're down quite a bit. And when they're down for a little while. So I would stick with the major manufacturers for the chargers. Like the main guys are, Siemens and ABB, guys like that. The off brands, who knows? And what their service ability is going to be like, who they're doing testing with. Like all three of the trucks that we are going to have available have had three different
charging partners. Yeah.
So you got to make sure you don't want to have three different trucks come in and none of them charge on the same charger. You don't want to have a different charger for every truck you have in the yard. It's not going to work.
Yeah, no, fair. And I think that's one interesting thing is, they all label as partners, right? It's not you have to use brand X. I think they've recognized, at least rightfully, that people are going to have other vehicles in their facility and may already have infrastructure in place, right? Or have to lean on something. Maybe you're leasing a facility, maybe you have one truck in your yard, and your landlord has decided, we're going to support EVs, so we're going to put in 5 chargers, but this is what we're putting in, right? Yeah. So you may have to adopt to whatever is kind of available to you. So they have their ideal partner that they can work with, and obviously know the product probably best. Yeah. But it's nice that they're not, there's one still OEM that has its own sort of integrated connection. But outside of that, everyone seems to be on board with using the same type of connection, whether or not the voltage match and the handshake match. That's the unknown as you go through from the different brands. But at least, the connection is everyone seems to be on board with how we plug into this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the constant. The chargers are all the charger plugs are all the same other than with Tesla.
Right.
And now they've got converters for the Tesla plugs. So now Ford is just announced they're going to be able to charge starting
with
next
their
year.
Superchargers, yeah.
On the chargers for Tesla.
Yep. And
I could see everybody eventually being able to charge on either system.
Which makes sense, right? It's kind of, you almost look back to the, Blu-ray, HD, DVD, and, beta versus VHS, which one's going to win. But I think maybe from this technology, it's not a matter of who wins. It's like, how do we just make all of these available to everyone? Because I think the infrastructure is so, that's the biggest challenge to ramp up is, if there is the supercharger network already available, how do we tap into that, right? Because you're paying for the service anyway, so it's not like it's free, but how do we take advantage of that, within North America for all the different platforms?
Yeah, and if you go to a mall, you don't have to see all the Tesla chargers being used and all the SAE chargers not being used, or vice versa.
Right,
if
you can swap in between.
All the ones you need are charging, and you see a bunch of empty ones you could use.
Yep.
It doesn't make sense, and I don't know what the in-service rates are or how much these chargers are being used, but it has to make sense for the people that supply the chargers to have them on site.
True.
To make money.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's a business, right?
You don't see gas stations with nobody there for a week or two, and make a feasible business out of that. It just doesn't make sense at all. They have to be used, and they got to make money too.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I guess the last product offering we do have is, and we've talked about it already with you, is obviously the NAVSAR EMV, and soon to come out is the ERH, sometime hopefully in 24. Again, we don't have really any general specs. I've seen the demo. We've had a chance to run with it. Really neat, but there's no published information as far as range and battery size yet. They're still fine tuning it, so we know it's coming. But the EMV, I mean, we have a demo unit that you've been overseeing. Yep. And we actually had a chance to kind of do an arrive and drive with a lot of customers and invites. What was some of the feedback I heard some stuff. Some of the feedback you got from some of the participants on that?
Yeah, some of I was in the passenger seat for quite a few of them, and most of the customers were just impressed with how smooth and how powerful it was, just pulling away. And the fact that it was just silent was amazing for a lot of them, that you're driving a big truck like that and you don't even make a sound. And they're just floored by that. The power was, I think, the main thing. The main come away was, it doesn't hesitate. It doesn't, like, everything's just direct drive. So it's instant. Not like your transmission has to kick in and your engine might sputter a bit or whatever. The fuel, you don't have to wait for the fuel to get sent down the system. And even with the regenerating braking, people were impressed with that. You don't have, if it was on the third level of regen braking,
you drive with one pedal.
It's like when you're in a golf cart. If you have that experience and you let your fuel off, and the thing just almost comes to a complete stop.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's neat. I had somebody feedback. I had same feedback. And the other one was with the noise. Obviously, you also don't have the vibration. Nothing's running, right? There's no engine running as you get going. Nothing's spinning underneath you.
It's not shaking.
No. So a lot of the comments were, a lot of the guys we had were fleet managers and that. So they're looking at from their guys like, this is gonna be great. Like just less fatigue for the guys, right? You don't have that constant vibration, just the noise of it plus the shaking of it. Just so it's gonna be a way better environment for them to work. Right, it's just going to be a nicer place to be, and I think they're going to get a lot of feedback from the guys that they just like these vehicles, right?
Yeah, no, that was another definitely a good point. You could have the radio on pretty low and you can hear it fine. Whereas if you're in a diesel truck, you got it halfway turned up rather than down near the bottom.
Yeah,
which is really nice.
Yeah, it's a nice feature, and kind of like everything else, that one is available. We still have the demo for guys to try.
It's actually, we've done the amount of demos that we need to do to sell it, so we can actually
it's for sale.
So we can sell it now and put it in service for somebody.
And outside that, the availability is pretty good on that too. And that's what we're finding with a lot of these as they come to market. The availability is there. It's really just get that consulting piece out front. Talk to your local, provider, or your especially your power company with where you live, or pull us in, and get that consultation going, because that needs to get going before you. I mean, order a truck by all means, but you need to get that going ahead of time, because that's going to be your longest lead time, I think, for anything in right now in this market.
Yeah, do the rate or the feasibility study and figure out your routes that you would use it for, and I would dip your toe before switching your whole fleet over.
For sure.
Things are changing again, like we said earlier in this conversation, that next year there's going to be changes. Every year there's going to be changes, and they're going to be bigger changes than what you normally see in vehicles that we've been building the MV now for. Really, between the different models they've called it, it hasn't changed a whole lot in a long time. But the electric ones will, definitely.
Yeah, they'll keep changing. I mean, just the architecture of how it goes together, where the engines, the electric engines or motors are, not an engine anymore, but that will change. Where things are plugged in and all that. That's going to move around as they refine and get feedback from fleets and other technology becomes available. And the other thing really is, at some point, there's not a lot of touch points on these vehicles from a maintenance point of view, but there is some, and we've actually, with the demo program, we've gone and set up our Mississauga location to be able to work on the EMV. So, you're involved with that. I mean, there was some criteria we had to meet to make a shop capable of working on these things as well.
Yeah. And I brought it up in our meeting yesterday with Isuzu about just being certified to work on the vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a program coming out with them as well. So every vehicle, you got to make sure you've got support and training for the people to work on the equipment if there's any kind of issue. And not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
We've made that investment so that there isn't any holdbacks when a customer comes to us.
Yeah, that's a good point. That kind of goes back to consulting. Make sure you can get the services you need at your facility, but also making sure that the product can be serviced when it needs to, within a fairly close range to. Otherwise, there's a lot of towing in that. But it's having those conversations up front to make sure it's a proper fit is kind of the key thing. So I think, from the expo, there's still lots more to come that we found out as far as infrastructure. But it's definitely, the momentum's there, right?
Yeah.
So it's got everyone's attention. So I don't think we're too far behind seeing some, announcements, hopefully, or some infrastructure kind of come, but it's coming. But definitely consult, get in front of it, and get the conversation going with regards to what you need for your fleet.
Yeah, and they're already planning the expo again for next year. So we know that the government's not going to stop pushing the mandate to lower emissions, which is great.
Yep.
So it is something that's going to continue. And again, I just suggest getting your toe in it,
yes,
understanding it, and then you can move forward and be knowledgeable when you want to make that decision to go and invest in it.
Yeah. No, excellent feedback. Well, hey, look, that concludes today's episode. I want to thank Terry for joining us and catching us up on everything electric. And to catch up on past episodes, check out transportationexchangepodcast.ca. Until next time, thanks for listening.